Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. I thought today we would have a look at some questions that I personally would pose to Gaijin if I was given the opportunity of some form of live stream like what's happened yesterday. I thought the way that they conducted the live stream was really good. The fact that they chose the most popular questions when it came from the War Thunder website and also from the Twitch and the YouTube, but also it is always nice to hear questions which you're personally interested in instead of stuff which, may not affect you when it comes to War Thunder. So what I've done here is I've written down 10 questions that I would personally like to see answered by somebody such as Kirill, and also thrown in a few community questions as well after asking a few people on the Tech Hub Discord. We have questions from Gorgeous Freeman, Dog for Life, also Tubo, and many others inputting their input when it comes to what they would like to see asked. There was also some things which did not make it into the questions, but I suppose are honorable mentions. This would be regenerative steering as a concept. Is it going to be implemented or not? The repair priority implementation, so basically being able to repair what you want first, adding in a mechanic such as that. More data available to players. This will help a lot when it comes to understanding the decisions made by Gaijin. What I'm talking about here is win rates, KDs, and also other things to that extent. Something which is pretty common in games such as other, online games such as League of Legends and Dota. So why not have it in War Thunder? And the last one is crew skill better definitions, something which I've harped on about for a few years, but I didn't think it required a full question. So let's go through them, and hopefully at some point some of these can be answered in the future. Whether I get an opportunity or others, it would be nice to see these concepts brought up. What I'm going to do is read the question out and then talk about the basis behind the question and why I think it's an important one. One thing to note is if you want to see these questions yourself, they are in the description below. There is a link to a notepad link which will give you access to basically what I've written down so you can have a look. So first question is, with new additions to the Warbond shop such as the crate giving access to a chance to get an older decal, are there any plans to further expand it to have different rewards for dedicated players? For example, a random camouflage drop or a crate for random titles? The reason for this question is simple as this. One thing that War Thunder talks about, or Gaijin talk about a lot, is being able to create content not just for the people who pay money, but also for the people who play the game a lot, and also just casual players as well. For me personally, I think the Warbond shop is a great area of the game to be able to promote that side of the community, whether they be free-to-play players or whether they be players who just, don't want to spend a ton of money, or at the same time are just highly dedicated to the game. This is something that should be expanded upon to, make it so you can get interesting ideas. And I've done a few videos in the past talking about the expansion of the Warbond shop and what it could do for the general game, and also trying to get players to play every day or every month on top of what is already there. The next question is, has there been any thought put towards the addition of World War I era vehicles, specifically airplanes? It has already been confirmed that World War I ships are on the table, and there are obvious issues with World War I tanks. What about the aviation part of the equation? What are the major issues of adding this era of vehicle? And if you are putting thought towards it, what are the monetization options open to Gaijin when it comes to these vehicles? And the reason why I'm asking this question is obviously a lot of people want to go more and more into the future of vehicles, and of course I respect that, but I also understand that World War I had a really interesting to and fro when it came to the air war which was going on. A lot of people talk about in the Second World War the technological advancement which went on from 1939 to 1945. In World War I you had very similar technological advancements, especially when it came to certain vehicles such as the tanks, but also mainly aviation and the airplanes and even stuff like the Zeppelins, which were running around at the time. So since in the past they've talked about the addition of World War I ships, such as the Insect class, why not have a look at, aircraft? Tanks, as we've talked about many times, the problem with World War I tanks is they're not really designed to take on other tanks, and also they're incredibly slow, incredibly belligerent, and incredibly boring because of the fact that they are incredibly slow, incredibly belligerent, and not designed to kill each other. So therefore, it wouldn't really work too well. But aviation doesn't have this issue. And one of the things, at least for me, that has been holding myself back when it comes to implementing World War I tanks, World War I planes, thinking about how you would do it, is the monetization aspect. You can definitely sell a top-tier premium like the KA-50 or the HMS Belfast for $40 to $50, $60, and a lot of people will go for it because you get the idea that you'll be able to use it to research a lot of the tech tree. When it comes to World War I, it would have to be in a weird rank 1/0 area, so you wouldn't get that same boost of research from the premiums, and therefore you wouldn't be able to, make them $40 to $50 to $60. So the question is, how do you monetize them effectively on top of the business model that Gaijin has right now? Or would you have to come up with another way? I suppose you could make people pay for them as kind of an expansion to War Thunder, but I'm sure that would annoy a lot of people and also fracture the player base. The other thing as well is you could, get people to pay for early access to them, and would that be able to reap in enough of the benefits that you get from, let's say, releasing the Chinese tech tree as a beta state? So yeah, it's interesting to think about, and I would just like to hear from Gaijin what would be the monetization options. The next question is, what is the monetization structure of the new game in development, Enlisted? We have heard hardly any news about the game over the last year. What stage of development is it in, and what developments from Enlisted will we see in War Thunder, such as the global illumination system? So this is pretty much a three-part question, right? So the first part is, what is the monetization structure? We've actually been thinking a lot, how the hell are they going to make money out of Enlisted? Because the idea with it before was that it would have individual campaigns, you would have to purchase individual campaigns and also purchase the general game. So that would be where Gaijin makes their money. But they've said, after community feedback, that it's going to be free to play. So the question is, how the hell are you going to make money out of it? Are you going to have to do it through cosmetics? Are you going to have to do it through, different guns and having to pay for them? Like, what is the strategy when it comes to actually making money out of it? Because we've seen a few games in the past be able to do it through the idea of cosmetics and customization, but they have been incredibly popular games to a massive degree. So I'm just wondering personally, what is it looking like now they decided to go to free-to-play? And also the stage of development, we know that they're doing alpha tests. We know that, there is obviously a base game available there. But to be honest, if you have a look at their websites, there is not a lot of information there that we can grasp from to work out what's going on. So just more information, any information is good information at this moment in time. Also, seeing cross-production is always interesting, as talked about in the question. Global illumination system. It is, in fact, a interesting part of the game. Creating something in, the Daegor engine from one game and putting it into another is always going to personally interest me. So that is stuff that I hope we see in the future. The next question is, with your recent statements about not wanting to add further captured vehicles because of the community reaction with facing them, would you extend that logic to vehicles such as the DDR vehicles? Further, has there been any thought towards the idea of removing captured vehicles from the simulator game mode? If the answer is you would like to eventually remove them, would you extend that idea to the same vehicles on either side of the conflict? So the example given is the US M24 Chaffee versus a Japanese M24 Chaffee. The whole point of this question is to work out where their logic lies when it comes to the expansion of vehicles in the game. One of the things that we have pushed into in the last two previous updates is obviously the Chinese vehicles and the addition of the DDR BMP-1, which is exactly the same as the Soviet BMP-1, meaning that there is absolutely no difference apart from its matchmaking because it's in the German tree instead of the Soviet tree. Does this mean that, with further additions to the DDR side of things for East Germany, how is it going to work? Because surely that is the same as having captured vehicles. People are facing the same vehicles that they are using, therefore is the same logic applied, or do they have a different set of thinking about these issues? So for me, I think it's important just to see if they agree with those ideas, or if the fact is they have a different way of looking at it, which could be the case, which is fine. The next question is, will there be any improvements to the social systems in the game, such as the way to identify areas of the map more precisely, more radio messages, or an improved support/report system? The overall fact is that a lot of the social systems in War Thunder, when it comes to being able to message people, when it comes to squadding up, have not changed too much over the last 6 years. Most of them are very similar to each other, and what that means is you have a situation where a lot of people use certain, let's say, radio messages for stuff which they actually don't mean. So there isn't many radio messages which are talking about specific scenarios, such as I'm assaulting this place or I'm defending this place. Instead of what happens is you have to try and by the way with different radio messages to try and get the person to understand what you're doing, but that's never going to happen. A simple way of drawing on the map or a simple way of just adding more options would easily make this easier, and hopefully in the next few years we get them. But I have never seen a question talking about it, so yeah, why not throw one in? The next question is, will there be a similar rework to bombs which was given to rockets in the recent years, specifically looking at AP bombs, such as the Japanese ones, giving them a purpose in the game? So we have recently seen a increase in armor when it comes to the general bases in War Thunder, and what this means is you do need a little bit of armor penetration to be able to annihilate the bases. This stops stuff like rockets being able to do a ton of damage to bases, and it also means maybe there is a hope for stuff like AP bombs. If you didn't know, the Japanese for certain vehicles have AP bombs. They have 800 kilo high explosive bombs and 800 kilo AP bombs. Both of these, the only real characteristic that matters is the explosive mass part. The AP part doesn't really matter. Therefore, if you take a HE 800 kilo bomb, it is going to be much more effective for your cause compared to an AP one. So with rockets, the way that rockets used to work is they used to pretty much just negate armor if they hit something, and the bombs are kind of doing the same thing apart from with an area of effect. My question is, will this be changed? So there is a reason to use stuff like AP bombs or other styles of bombs when they get implemented, such as cluster bombs. The next question is, certain tech trees in the game have holes which have gone unaddressed for many years. Examples of this would be the range from the 4.7 to 7.7 of the USSR and British tech trees, where the lack of an AA vehicle is apparent. As a person who is interested in parity between nations and lineups, having access to different types of vehicles of similar BRs for different nations will only be a positive to the game. What holes does Gaijin see need to be addressed when it comes to the tech trees, and how important is parity of lineups when it comes to decisions of what vehicles to add? I think this question is pretty much self-explanatory. There are areas of the game, whether you want to talk about light vehicles for Britain and Germany, whether you want to talk about AA for Britain and the Soviets, whether you want to talk about the fact that Japanese top tier for ground is looking a little bit barren right now, or whether you want to talk about the lack of early tier jets for certain nations, such as, the Italians. The fact is, there are holes in a lot of tech trees which do affect all game modes: air, naval, and ground, even helicopters, I suppose. So the main thing is, where is it on the priority list to be able to fill these holes, or which holes do Gaijin actually see as holes? Do they think it's okay for something like a 4.7 ZSU-37 to be taken up into the 7.3BR? Is that seen as an okay thing to do? And yeah, it's kind of as simple as that. Is it a priority at all? Is it thought about? All of that wonderful stuff. The next question is, with the recent sales coming to an end, will there be a further push to put Gaijin products in other areas of the market to try and engage with a broader consumer base? An example of this, an example of these products on external sites would be Humble Bundle, which offers packs at sometimes discounted rates for War Thunder. With more launchers coming onto the market, such as the Epic Games launcher, have you put any thought in exclusive content for different areas to promote use of said areas? Now, I personally am against exclusive content in every single way. I understand why it exists, but that doesn't mean I have to agree with it. That's why I don't like stuff like the XM1s being only available, one of the XM1s only being available on Xbox, and one of them only being available on PC and Sony products like PlayStation. So for me, it would be much better to not have exclusivity, but it is also a factor that we see increasing, especially in the PC domain. So the fact is, has there been any thought put towards these areas, and what type of marketing strategies are they thinking of implementing when it comes to broadening the product of War Thunder? The next question is, weather effects are something that has been greatly improved upon in the game over the last few years, but some underlying issues still exist when it comes to favoring one side of the battlefield. Examples of this would be a horizon overlooking one spawn blinding the enemy team fighting into the sunset, or the position of the sun in air battles or cloud placement in terms of setup for attack. Do you agree with the natural advantages and or disadvantages this can give on the battlefield, or would you like to lessen their effects? So this is pretty much just talking about the natural effect of setting up into a battle. There can be situations where, let's say, you set up in an aerialistic battle on Raw, where you play the game completely differently depending on where the sun is placed. You change your angles of attack, you change where you are looking, and what also can massively affect this is the cloud placement when it comes to the general battle and what altitude those clouds are at. The problem with this is it can give a really big inherent advantage to one side. Mainly, the easiest example is in ground realistic, where you have a situation where one side is just blinded by the sun, which has got better over the years, especially since the Daegor engine was updated, but it is still a factor that is a problem. And it would be nice, at least from my point of view, to lessen the effects of these natural environments, so we have less RNG in the game, which is something that I think is only a positive when it comes to the skill part of the game, and lessen the frustration of it. It seems like the majority of the time people are annoyed at the game is because of RNG elements, whether it's to do with the server, whether it's to do with ping or your internet connection. So why add natural environments which create RNG elements with it? The last question of mine is, with the recent announcement of larger ships coming to War Thunder, what are your plans for the Soviet tech tree in this regard? The USSR historically struggled with larger ship designs post-World War I, and with the talk in the past of paper designs being implemented for ships, would you follow that route? What do you think are the key balancing factors between larger ships and smaller ships, e.g. how should a destroyer fight a light cruiser to come out on top? Do you think anti-ship missiles will be required in War Thunder for nations which would struggle with ships post-cruiser size? So the whole point of this question is to try and get an understanding of where their design ideas are happening, because at least when it comes to naval, for me, bigger ship wins the majority of the time. The only time that bigger ship does not win is when there are extenuating circumstances, such as an RNG event, which you can't account for, or such as you get capped out because you can't fit on certain maps. So when we get to like battleship level or pocket battleship level, this is just going to be insane. Even just between vehicles. If you compare something like the Yamato to battleships of other nations, such as the British and the Americans, it dwarfs them. And this is a big problem that a lot of people seem to be forgetting. The fact that battleships are not all one common size, just like light and heavy cruisers are not all one common size. All you have to do is look at the light cruisers of the Soviets compared to the others. They're different guns, different size of ship, different engines, all of this stuff. There is no uniform measurement for these things when it comes from country to country, unless you look at stuff like the Washington Treaty and so on. So the thing is, how are these issues going to be addressed? Or are they going to be addressed? Or are you just going to have a similar problem to what we see a lot of the time, which is whoever has the best top-tier vehicle, everybody is going to play. And that is why they've gone with the design philosophy of mixed battles at top tier for Naval. And if not, what is going to be implemented to try and sort this issue? And anti-ship missiles is an answer, but it is not the only answer. And hopefully we get some clarification on how that's all going to work. Because right now, might does make right in ships, and that is an unfortunate case. The last part is obviously the community questions that I talked about earlier, and we'll just go through them. And I actually think some of these are amazing. Like they're really, really, really good questions. So the first one is, when will we have the next World War mode, and what were your impressions on the first season? Now, we know that the second season of World War Mode is probably coming at some point next year, but the important part of the question is, what were Gaijin's impressions? Were they positive? Were they negative? What are they working on to improve it? Because they did, Kirill did say in the stream yesterday they are working on stuff, but he didn't say what. So for me, I want to know if their basic mechanics are changing. Are they looking to create a more holistic view of the game? Are they looking to reduce the effect on commanders? What are they doing to improve it so we can have some input? The next question is, when will we see the penetration changes to APDS, which were discussed in a previous developer Q&A earlier this year? This was something which was brought up. It was also seen on the dev server for a little bit, and what Gaijin said is they are looking to implement them. They haven't fully, gone through them yet, but it will be at some point. So hopefully, they get here. This question could also be tied into the bomber repair cost idea, which we saw, what feels like a few months ago at this point. So hopefully that is added as well. The next question is, do you have plans to further develop the damage models so it takes into account areas of vehicles which are external to internal modules and their effect on them? An example of this would be how you can hit the Challenger fuel tank on the side of the vehicle and it will set the engine on fire, even though there is an armor layer between the fuel tank and the engine to prevent this. Will there also be thought put towards the idea of different percentages put towards the ability to set a vehicle on fire, depending on whether it runs on petrol or diesel? So obviously, if you have a look at petrol and diesel, they have different flammability indexes, and also on top of this, a lot of vehicles are designed so if one module gets broken, it doesn't affect the other modules as much, which is what you see on stuff like the external fuel tanks on the Challenger. If you have a look at the model of the Challenger, it has like a little bit of armor which separates the outer fuel tanks compared to the engine. That is why that stuff is there. But unfortunately in game, that is not implemented. So yeah, it would be nice to see if that be true. But also this is a thing that would affect a lot of damage models for a lot of vehicles, which is why the question has been added. The next question is, with the recent news that Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo agree to disclose loot box odds for future games, and also their statement that they'll require all publishers of upcoming PlayStation, Xbox, and Switch games to reveal the chances of earning rare items, What are your thoughts about this decision, and will it prompt War Thunder to disclose their drop rates for their crates, such as the ones available on the Gaijin market and in the item shop? So this is a rule that Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo are bringing in basically in 2020. What they want to do for all their future products is make sure that people know what the percentages of what they're getting are. This is something that countries, certain countries such as China already do, and there are companies that get around this system by basically, I'll give you an example of what happens. So China says that you need to put in the percentage chance or percentage drop rate of a specific card in Hearthstone, right? Out of getting one of the card packs. And to obfuscate this, what Blizzard did is you buy a little bit of dust, and with the dust, you get a free card pack. So technically, you're not buying the card pack, but you are buying the card pack. And then they don't have to put in the odds. You can see how this is a scummy business practice, only designed to make sure that the consumer or the customer does not know the odds for what they are getting. So I think this is a very positive move that Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo are doing in order to give customers a right to complain if what they're seeing on the screen is not what they're actually getting. Obviously, with a company, it would be better if you don't show the odds for certain things because, you want to trick people into buying stuff and buying a lot of them. But at the same time, I think honesty when it comes to these loot box mechanics is definitely something that is required. So I really like that question, and hopefully we do get some more clarity for that style in the next year. The next question is, would there be a possibility to add lower tier helicopters which do not have access to missile or rocket armaments? Instead, they would be armed with guns and or bombs, providing support from the air. So it's pretty much trying to take away from high-tier helicopters and maybe putting in some mid-tier ones which would have access to, HMGs or something like that. And the idea is to broaden the helicopter genre instead of making it an exclusively top-tier missile-orientated idea. So I think that would be interesting to see, and if they have some plans for it, maybe they have some plans for the Scout idea, or the Scout thoughts for helicopters, but we'll have to see, going forward. The next question is, will there be an expansion of the first stage ammo system where you are able to choose the place to place the ammunition in your vehicle, which will affect your reload rates? This could be a nice addition to give players more choice, but also with a risk. For example, moving the shells from the Tiger II's turret to increase survivability, but also increasing reload speed since the shells are not in the first stage ammo rack. So this question is once again designed around giving players more choice and also making it so the vehicles are personalized to those players and their playstyle. It must be annoying for a lot of Tiger drivers when it comes to getting popped in the turret and wanting to put that ammunition somewhere else but not being able to. The other thing that was also brought up at the same time was being able to distribute your fuel to certain fuel tanks and not others, so therefore you could have control over how that worked as well. That could definitely be added into this idea. And the last question is, has there been any thoughts towards adding a battle pass type system that we see in other games such as Cuisine Royale to War Thunder? Also, with the increase of Build-A-Bear style events, which are very much focused around the individual player and their skill in the game, are there any plans of adding events themed around community goals, similar to the festive event and its Christmas lights, in order to bring players together throughout the year? I think this to me is probably one of the most important questions when it comes to it. One thing that we've definitely seen with the Battlefield Engineer event and Operation Shipyard events is they are very much designed for the individual. They are very much designed for one person to play solo to play the game and just play it to its best efficiency. The problem is, if you're talking about fun factor, especially in an online game which doesn't have a full-on elo system in its matchmaker, you have to make it a bit more social in order to bring the community together instead of to divide them against each other in an aggressive, competitive way. So for me, it would be lovely to see more stuff which is designed around community ideals and community events, just like Dog for Life, who asked this question. And also with the Battle Pass idea, it is something that we've seen in a lot of other games, Fortnite, also Cuisine Royale, Apex Legends. And the question is, I mean, I talked about it before in a video, and a lot of people didn't like that system because they thought that it would be similar to other systems like Fortnite. And they might be right, they might be wrong, but I do think free content is good content, you know, for the general individual. And if you want to pay for a bit more, well, you already have premium, you already have, you know, premium vehicles or stuff. It should be seen as an optional thing for cosmetics and maybe even some boosters and stuff like that. Even Smite has a battle pass mode, so I don't see why War Thunder would be, unless they obviously put stuff in that battle pass which would be a little bit too much, such as, you know, vehicles and things. I think it would be overall a good system. But yeah, it would be nice to see Gaijin's input on it. So there are all the questions. There are all the thoughts when it comes to, at least my thoughts, for stuff that would like to be answered. Next time they have a Q&A like this, I'll make sure that these questions are front and center so I can try and get them answered, at least maybe a few of them. And also I'll see if I can find any official comments when it comes to any of these questions for the time being. I hope you all have a wonderful day. And if you have any questions yourself, make sure to put them in the comments so I can have a read. I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Blackie, Daniel Stanton, Jay Wilt, John Ryman, Joseph Anders, Martinez, Moxie, Super Cacti, Uyins Terry, Elove Goat, and Seductive Trash Can for supporting the channel.